The DataNet Federation Consortium is generating a set of example policies that execute each of the tasks defined for ISO 16363. How can preservation tasks be mapped to actionable rules? The mapping is not unique and depends upon the environment provided by the data grid middleware. A different data management system will need to modify the rules to interface with the local capabilities. A general approach examines each task to define the constraints for when and where the task should be executed. Is the task done immediately on ingestion of a file, or is the task done periodically for an entire collection? Define the operations that need to be controlled. Do the operations have to be staged with a specific order of execution? Can the operations be reapplied if there is a hardware failure or network outage? Define the state information that is needed by both the constraints and operations. Is the state information managed as attributes on collections or files or users or storage resources? Policies may be needed to initialize state variables, control execution of the operations, and verify compliance over time. Each task will be implemented by a set of policies. The table shown here provides example tasks. If we select a task such as replicate a file, we can apply a general approach to decide how the task can be turned into a computer actionable rule. If we can build a parameterized version of the rule, we hopefully can reuse the rule to support other tasks. If we can encapsulate the operations performed by the rule in policy functions, then we can reuse the policy functions within other tasks or other rule versions. An example is a replication policy that is executed at the AC post proc for put policy enforcement point. The replication is done every time a file is loaded into the data grid. A second policy may reuse the same capability when replicas are verified. If a missing replica is identified, the same type of file replication needs to be redone. The set of information and operations performed by a policy can be defined by a policy template. Examples of policies for the lifetime library are provided in Chapter 3 of the Policy Templates Workbook. Replication policies are presented in Chapter 3.4. We can analyze these templates to define the state information and operations that are performed. Three rules are needed to provide a minimal implementation of a replication task. First, state information must be set that will be used by the replication task. We need to define a default storage resource where the replicated files will be stored. This is done at the AC set resource scheme for REPL policy enforcement point, which calls the MSI set default resource microservice to define the storage location for the lifetime library. This is RENC Unix 1. Second, we need to control when and where the replication is performed. We can restrict the replication to files in a specific collection. This is done at the AC post process for put policy enforcement point. The replication is done as a delayed function since the copy is being written to a tape system. AC post proc for put, the condition is on $object path like lifelib zone home, then delay 1 second, MSI sysrepl data object, and the replica location. Third, we need to periodically verify that the replicas have appropriate access controls, that the replicas have not been corrupted, and that the replicas have the correct distribution. See the rule lifelib zone home rwmore rules rda-replication-rule.r. An important constraint for protected data is that access controls are set on not only the original file, but also on any replicas that have been made of the file. The rule RDA integrity ACL.R verifies that a specific access control has been set on each file of a collection. If the access control is missing, it is created. The policy template for the rule is given here. The input variables are *ACL, the access control we're checking, *call, a relative collection name that will be analyzed, *user, a username. The session variables are $rodzone_client and $username client to identify the person running the rule. The policy uses persistent state information, the collection internal identifier and name, call ID, and call name, a file internal identifier for access control for the type of access on the file, and for the user who will have the file access data ID, data access type, data access user ID, the file internal identifier and file name, data ID, and data name, token internal identifiers, names, and groups, which specify the system variables used to identify access controls, user ID, username, and user zone to identify properties of a user, zone connection, and zone name for properties of the data grid. The operations that are performed are fail to force an execution halt if we have bad input, for each to loop over the query result list, if for a conditional test, MSI split path by key to split the path name using a delimiter, remote to remotely execute a microservice, select to create a query, and write line to write an output line. Take 7 minutes to complete exercise 101. Pick an ISO 16363 requirement and implement a policy template that would describe an enforcing policy appropriate for protected data. See Chapter 6 of the Policy Examples Workbook on Protected Data Policies. Please load a paragraph describing your result into the lifetime library in the sub-collection class INLS 624 by the end of today's class.